You are listening to From Embers, a weekly show on CFRC 101.9 FM about anarchist and anti-authoritarian ideas and practice. We are broadcasting from the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples on land that has come to be called Kingston, Ontario, Canada, because of the thievery and brutality of the Canadian state and its empire-loving parents. From Embers is about fires, some real and some metaphorical. Fires started generations ago and tended to over the years. Little sparks all across this territory that we hope will grow, spread, and engulf the thieving state called Canada and the capitalist system that has plagued this land since the fur trade.
Today on From Embers, I'm talking with Lee Reed, a radical anti-capitalist hip-hop artist and Hamilton legend. I know we've been talking to a lot of Hamilton anarchists on the show lately, and you might be feeling kind of over it, but I encourage you to keep listening. I know I really appreciated hearing Lee's thoughtful perspectives as an artist and organizer, and as someone who's been involved in Hamilton's independent music scene for over 2 decades. Anyway, I'll keep this super short because I want to have time to play a handful of great tracks for you all today, including a selection from Lee's most recent album, Before and Aftermath, as well as some older tracks that I love. Here's the interview. Thanks for coming on the show and chatting with me.
Not at all. It's great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I guess you've been rapping and performing and doing art in Hamilton for nearly 2 decades. And in that time, I guess, how have you seen it change?
Yeah, it has been over 2 decades now. And yeah, the city, I lived in the downtown from about the late 90s through to the present, and it's changed tremendously. So I would say, through the earlier 90s and 80s, the city was dealing with a huge downturn and the biggest sort of layoffs at the steel plants. And so, the downtown kind of, it suffered a lot. The lower city, as they call it, suffered quite a bit. It was really widespread poverty, and, it still exists to this day in parts, but back then the downtown it had a very, scary reputation, or it was a rough place to be downtown. The rest of the city was scared of it. And it was, kind of picked on in the local paper and the local news. It didn't have a great relationship with the rest of the city. It was a much different place, the downtown back then. Nowadays, it's basically the west end of Toronto. It's been swallowed up and subsumed by the great gentrification beast, basically, and it's basically stretching east from there and pushing into lots of other sort of working class neighborhoods that are east of the downtown. And it happened so quickly. Like, it went from a place where there was a lot of available rental stock at a very reasonable rate to the present day where, there's just an article yesterday putting Hamilton in the top 10 most unaffordable cities in Canada. It's been a really big change, it's changed a lot.
How has your music changed over those years, or over the years that you've been doing hip hop?
Yeah, back then I was in my late 20s when I started doing it, my mid to later 20s. And I was writing, I guess you'd say, radical or revolutionary music, but it was, it was very like American centric. I'd say. I think my sort of topics weren't as Canadian and weren't as local. Back then I was punching higher. I don't really know how to phrase it, but I think like I wasn't aware of Canada's role as well in things back then. It was like America was the problem. Back then it was anti-globalization and stuff like that. It was that was my introduction, I guess, to radical politics, was through the analysis of the U.S. and U.S. imperialism. And I would say that the biggest change in my music is that I've grown an awareness and an analysis of Canadian and even local stuff in my music that I didn't really get back then. I think that's like been my biggest shift, and I think probably the most important. Yeah, I think that's the biggest change.
Yeah, I also wanted to say that I think the first album of yours that I heard was The Butcher, the Banker, the Bitumen Tanker. That was like
nice, yeah,
super like about stuff that was going on in the place that I lived, or the region that I lived. And like it also kind of made my life, like it was one of the first times that I heard political rap that I was like, oh, this is like amazing. Your like flow is good, and these are like amazing beats. And like, yeah, I don't know. I appreciated that like connection, I guess.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I really like that record. We spent more time on that. Was the first time I spent that much time kind of working on something. I like that record a lot. Thank you.
Do you see connections between what's going on in the States and things that have been happening in Hamilton, or like?
Totally. America right now, and our relationship and the influence that we're getting from America right now is really scary to me. I don't ever remember a time where so many Canadians kind of embraced the crappiest aspects of America. Like there's always been a sort of corner of Canada that, wants to support the States and everything they do. I mean, even progressive people have had better relationships over the years with the States. But yeah, like I can't believe the sheer number of Canadians that like are into Trump, you know what I mean? Like actually like think like, oh, that's what we need here. A real straight talker. Like it actually really is scary, I never thought I'd see this. I never did. The conservatives in Canada have always obviously kind of supported American things more in recent history, but even under like Harper and before him, there was still this kind of like, Canadians were proudly not American, they really wanted to stand as something different. And yeah, just the spread of that like ideology down there of the alt-right and the way it's sort of affected things up here is really scary. Obviously not as dangerous. I mean, that's not even the right word. Like it's not as I guess it's just not as much open carried machine gunnery. I mean, I don't know, like it's not the same. It's still Canadian, like the Yellow Vest movement, like those folks in Calgary that are also, in Alberta and Edmonton and Calgary especially. But we have them here, yeah, and one of the spots they want to congregate in is in Hamilton, and I definitely feel it. I've never felt such a weird connection between bad politics here in the States as we do right now.
What's your relationship to anarchism?
I'm an anarchist. I practice anarchist politics, and I practice anarchist organizing and support anarchist causes and local anarchists and anarchist movements. Yeah, I would say, I think that sometimes I feel as though, because I have a regular job and I have a regular life in some ways, I sometimes feel like, compared to a lot of the friends and folks that I know, that I'm maybe, not as devoted as some folks are around me. But, I've always considered myself an anarchist.
I don't know. I feel like jobs happen to the best of us sometimes, unfortunately. And
No doubt.
Building debt for our grandchildren's children's. You should put this on the billing shit. Check. I don't trust the bank. Fuck a bank, break banks. I run on the bank, I stick a shank in the banker's ink. Grip banks, print cash like God. A big bang, think tanks, just think banks, bang. The chicken everything, yeah. National debt, they'll cut checks, execs. They call it stimulus. Yes, blessed economy stressed. Except it gon' be bailouts of death. Then you accepted it with hell's yes. TV says that it's for the best. Then scientists fuck with your mind, get redesigned to spread their lies for them. Lockstep, right, left, they in the red. They still buy fighter jets. Banks are cold, heartless souls cold. Lock low to the profit flow. The market grow off of a bankroll. Tanks roll all over the globe. Oh God, no. Oh God, no. Oh God, no. Fuck the bank. Fuck the bank. Fuck the bank. Bank to the bank, the bank, the bank, bank, bank. Bank on the fact, the banks can give a fuck about. Tough luck, brother, fun, need to recover from. Plunder, greed, we under siege by these Wall Street thieves. Cash machines, transaction access fees. The kind of finance, not catastrophe. Free markets, they're not free. The bank cartel to the arm to the TC. Goldman Sachs, holding stacks of golden cash. You tax to the max, that's bad. Lube your ass up smooth to the tone of trillions of smackaroos. And who trusts these smug, corrupted motherfuckers that act with justice? I say fuck 'em, buck, back a truck up and then empty the cupboards. Banks are cold, heartless souls go. Lock low to the profit flow. Market grow off of a bank rolling. Tanks roll over the whole damn globe. Oh God, no. Oh God, no. Oh God, no. Yo. Big up, it's a stick up. 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 And I'm
What was it like being an artist when anarchists in the city were kind of first blaming them for gentrification, or when that sort of tension was ongoing?
Well, that's a very that question gets right into my heart. The truth is that I actually had some falling out with anarchists when I was first confronted with some of the writing and some of the rhetoric around it and towards artists. And I had I had like some pretty public fights with folks that I've come to be much better friends with and have a much better understanding of everything. And honestly, that kind of tussle with that is probably what catapulted me into taking it as seriously as I could and doing the things that I could do about it. It was a good turning point in my life. So basically it was back, I guess it would have been, I'm not even sure when all that would have popped off. Probably about 8 years ago, maybe more than that, probably 10 years ago at this point. Some folks now that are dear friends of mine wrote a rather scathing article in a paper that existed back then called Mayday. And it was basically like just the title of it was Artists Are the Foot Soldiers of Gentrification. And, I was an active artist living on that exact street that they're talking about. And I felt very, slighted by it. I didn't see a huge difference between artists moving downtown and doing work, and activists moving downtown and doing work. And yeah, it was kind of nasty, actually. Well, I was a jerk, basically, is what it came down to. I was a jerk. I'm a mouthy jerk. I can be really terrible when I set my mind on being terrible. I'm a real snarky jerk. But basically, yeah, I kind of lashed out at it. I was like, this isn't right. You can't say that about this person or this person or this person. And for the most part, what I'm referring to are people that had been there from the 80s doing stuff, which I think, if we can get right into it, I think some of the analysis was coming off strange because there are people that all had just moved there within the last few years. And they were talking about people that had been struggling to do something with their downtown since it had become a scary, dangerous place for the last 20 years, and it's a weird conversation. And I know now, historically, I was on the wrong side of it, and have proudly found my footing in, the aftermath of that. But yeah, at the time it was really tense. I got to say, it was really tense. I didn't know any of those folks as well as I know them now. I don't know how it would have all went down if I had known who it was I was even talking to, because a lot of it was written anonymously, and it was a weird time. I guess when you're like in a place that you're buried in it for so long, like the downtown, we could do anything we wanted. There was no cops down there. There was, you want to throw a party, you could throw a party in any building and do whatever you wanted. And, there was never any bylaw or cops or rules or anything really. There was cops, but they were easy to avoid. And they weren't looking for, minimum wage service job working punk kids throwing jams in the back of their building or whatever, they didn't care. So it was weird to live in that for so long, and then to all of a sudden be told that was like damaging. I think a lot of the people that reacted to it were people that had like literally grown up there. So they were like, wait a minute, I'm not, what are you talking about, kind of thing. So it's a complicated thing. Gentrification is a complicated thing. Of anything that you can talk about politically, it's the thing that is the most painful, for interpersonal relationships on a local level. Like, it's okay you can get a room full of decent white people together and you can talk about a lot of things that they have messed up and a lot of things that they've done wrong. And you can do it in a way that they don't feel personally slighted or hurt by it. But you can't talk about gentrification with a room full of white folks in Hamilton right now without really like basically saying to somebody in the audience, your business is garbage, or your very presence is danger to people. It's like, it's the weirdest thing to try and talk about, and it leaves a lot of hurt feelings. As I experienced myself, like I said, when I was first attacked with that's how I reacted to. But it's become really evident. It's become impossible to ignore, even for the people that would have been most offended by this criticism and this anti-gentrification analysis. It's really gotten to the point where like nobody can look around and be like, but there's good things about it. Like the last maybe 2 years in the downtown, there's nobody saying like, but what we got was good, right? Or like there's nobody trying to make a case that like no Richard Floridas out there that are like, isn't this great? You know what I mean? I don't know.
I guess I'm also curious about how did that affect your relationships with other artists in Hamilton? Or also maybe specifically, what was it like for you during the anti-gentrification wave of actions? I guess being such a public anarchist, or like publicly having those perspectives.
Yeah, I've never felt, real like fear or like real problems, but I've lost a lot of friends. Yeah, I've been cut out of a lot of kind of gigs that I used to get asked to do. Got kind of cut out of some of the more Hamilton sort of stuff that goes on here. And I used to be a big ambassador for the city. Like I used to go on the road and, and talk about what a great place Hamilton was and whatever, right? And have a lot of relationships still with people that still want to see that in me. You know what I mean? Old friends and people that I know through music. But yeah, I've burned a lot of bridges in the last 10 years, you know, a lot of promoters and different places that don't really want to work with me. I've gotten threats at work, and I've gotten kind of hate mail and stuff around it. People figured out, you know, like where I work, and it's not hard, you know, and basically like called me at work and were like bugging me. Yeah, it was a little weird. It's a little weird, I guess, but I think it's important for me to do, because like, you know, a lot of the writing that we do and a lot of the action that takes place in Hamilton is done by people anonymously, and it's obviously not me, but it's good for me to try to interpret it for people in a way that can kind of explain it. And I guess I don't really know how to word what I'm saying, but I guess that I take the job of like kind of being an ambassador of anarchy seriously in Hamilton. So even if it's something that I might not agree with that happened, or that, you know, I might not want to, I will weigh in and try and explain to people things that they can't get from reading an enormous anonymous script, or, you know, they can't interact with. Like I'll stand behind something and I'll say, this is why it happened. And, you know, a lot of people kind of work through their thoughts on something in a social media space, or in a social space, or in a space where they can kind of like hear some other thinking on it and kind of, you know, reflect on everything that's said and settle into how they feel about it. And yeah, I think that it's important for people that are like public about their anarchist views to get out there and be like, yay, anarchy. You know, I'm proud of that. I think it's an important thing. As proud as I am of my music or anything else I've done, I'm like, yeah, well, you want to get mad at anarchists, something that happened over the weekend or something, people will yell at me about it, and I'll talk to them about it. You know, I'm okay with that.
Are there relationships that you have with different artists that were them being able to have those conversations with you, or like listen to those perspectives from someone they know or like or trust, like kind of made a difference in their thinking about it?
I think so. I really think so. You know, I mean, especially in the world of hip hop here in Hamilton, there's only a few people that are like more senior in the kind of like lineage, and they don't play as much as I do, or they haven't sort of pursued it as full time as I have. So for a lot of like young cats that are coming up, I'm like the super old guy, you know. Like I have people I look up to in Hamilton, I guess is what I'm getting at, but these guys might not have shows with them or whatever, right? So
Sure.
I get around a lot of young folks, and yeah, I know for sure that I've had those chats with folks. There's a young dude in town named Slur, for instance, and he has a catalog of stuff that's like, you know, that modern sort of hip hop, very, some folks say emo, you know, there's a lot of like personal stories and stories about bad things they've done and that sort of stuff, right? And Slur wrote a song about gentrification and asked me to guest on it, and I'm like, yeah, for sure, kid, I'll do that. You know, the song's called "Go the F Home." I think it's called Gtfh.
Nice.
And you can find it on Bandcamp. So I do a verse on that, you know, and I know that especially with younger folks. I think that's probably the biggest effect that way, has been with the MCs that are a good 10 or more younger years than me,
The waves capsizing, every push take a piece of the island. Can't believe the position that I'm in. Our peninsula is dying, the art of safe haven. I see the Lord in these hard-working faces. This was my Zion, now I'm gone. It can all change in a minute, bruh. Gentrification is our city genocide. No wonder the words sound so similar. High rent, small condo, those options will limit ya. They want deface this place, rearrange us. Keep the pretty pictures, ostracize the painters. This was rock and roll, now fish tacos replace us. New hips to Hamilton, this just ain't us. It's an influx of the enemy. I promise to always be defending thee until developers get sick of me and use their trust fund money to put a hit on me, but they never getting rid of me. It's our city, won't you go to fuck home? Go to fuck home, go to fuck home. It's our culture, won't you go to fuck home? Go to fuck home, go to fuck home. It's our art, won't you go to fuck home? Go to fuck home, go to fuck home. It's our home, won't you get the fuck gone? Won't you go to fuck home? We don't need you at all.
Hipster resto, celebrity chef, yo, locally source shit. Locals can't afford and real estate hot while my city got colder. Condo developer, dress code shoulder. Sold the city, act dev committee, now downtown shitty. The cost of living got mom and pop shops with no pots to piss in. Stole Steel City, lost to them villains. They want our home as commodity. The whole blocks is lost to the process and plotting. Bougie art show, boutique nachos, and the bubble about to burst in Toronto. This art don't crawl, yo. No, this art's tall, it's the stacks, it's still cold. The fast code, stab your cash hole, asshole. It's our city, won't you go to fuck home?
It's our city, won't you go to fuck home? Go to fuck home, go to fuck home. It's our culture, won't you go to fuck home? Go to fuck home, go to fuck home. It's our art, won't you go to fuck home? Go to fuck home, go to fuck home. It's our home, won't you get the fuck gone? Won't you go to fuck home? We don't need you at all.
What were your initial thoughts in the days and weeks after Locke Street?
I guess my immediate concern was like for the safety of a bunch of folks I know, the repression and just the, both the state, but also like far right groups that, are being cheered on by people that were upset about their window or whatever. It was a really weird time for a few days there. Like, honestly, when I say I lost a lot of friends over the years, a good half to 2/3 of it occurred like within the month or two after Locke Street. And, I don't want to say whether I supported or didn't support the thing or whatever the case is, right? But the fallout of it, it's been really interesting. So the immediate was this sort of massive public backlash, circling of the wagons of capital. It was really weird and kind of creepy even. Like one of the donut shops that was attacked, like had a donut that was like, it was meant to look like glass shards. Like it had lemons in these like clear shards, and it was like the lemon window donut or whatever. I think the prime minister came and ate one of those, if memory serves me correctly. And yeah, so the immediate fallout was, and it shocked me, was the number of people who I would have thought were pretty okay that were just like openly playing Columbo on social media and being like, I think that person is this person, and like pointing to videos and being like, that's not so and so, they wouldn't be there. And just, it was honestly really scary, and I was doing stuff for the book fair that weekend, and had seen the flyer and whatnot, and so I knew how widespread that could have been, I guess. But it's been interesting because I have to say that so I was working on tenant organizing at that time, and we were just gearing up for the rent strike when that occurred. So the Locke Street incident happened in March, I think, or around there. And I think we kicked off the rent strike in May. And so I was working on this other project at the same time that happened. And basically, between those two things, Hamilton's kind of institutional interpretation of gentrification completely changed. Within that year, McMaster, the Art Gallery of Hamilton, the Hamilton Artists Inc., all these different groups, some arms of the city, held round table type things to talk about gentrification and to the TED Talky dialogue workshops and chats about gentrification, basically. And it all happened after Locke Street, and people would never want to admit it, but it did definitely make the city look at itself in a way that it never had, because there were people out there that were saying this is why this happened, and let's all calm down, and let's have a chat about this. And it made a lot of people, I think, kind of question where it's all going, and what the kind of response to that will be down the road, and what sort of what are we building in Hamilton? What are we doing with all of this? Those conversations all kind of publicly, institutionally came to the forefront in the months after. And I mean, the effects of that are still felt. The effects of that is what landed Cedar back in prison. The effects of that is what the HPS is using to try and paint the Pride defenders as rabble rousers or troublemakers or fake queers or whatever. It's very real still, and it'll linger a long time. And it has big ripples to this day.
I'd heard that you and some other folks put together and played a fundraiser show for some of those Hamilton Pride defenders facing repression. How did that go? What was that like?
Oh, it was great. The show went really well. It was sold out in the end, and they raised quite a bit of money. It was put on by a group called Safer Gigs Hamilton, and they asked me in the earliest stages of it to get involved. So I helped book some of the other acts and sort of helped with the lineup and stuff. But really, it was a big event. There's a lot of tabling and a lot of info sharing and a lot of support. A lot of people came through. People bought tickets that didn't even come. I think they raised $2,700 at the door, and had a rather large donation from QP Ontario, I think, that's bought a block of tickets as a donation. So yeah, it went really, really well. It was a really fun night, a variety of acts and styles, and a lot of love in the room. There was at one point, this is amazing. At one point, the cops showed up. Okay, so at This Ain't Hollywood, I've played there more than any club I've ever played. And I've never seen this in all my time, but the cops came in. They did a walk through the bar and asked for the liquor license and asked to see their paperwork, Wow. And the bar has never had that happen. Yeah, so that's kind of messed up. But the best part about it is that they came in during my set. So they had to hear some really like really strong anti-police sentiment, and like a room full of people with their fists up, like yelling along about it and stuff. It was like, I didn't even know they were there. I found out after, but they were there for like the last 2 songs of my set, and one of them was a song I'd written about Cedar, and it doesn't speak highly of the HPS. It was pretty funny. I wish I could have seen it, actually. I wish I could have seen them.
I feel like they've just consistently been doing all the wrong things.
Yeah, and the city too. The mayor, it's a big mess. It really is. And I've been like pretty proud of the outpouring of support. The march that they did, where they went from our city central park, like Gore Park, through the streets in a kind of like whose streets are streets fashion, you know. I've done that 50 to 75 times in Hamilton, and that was like the loudest, like rowdiest, I'm going to say most fun, one of those things that I've ever been in or done. It gave me goosebumps a number of times. You know, at one point we were rounded and went up to City Hall where we were going to gather, and there was a vigil that day for folks in Sudan. Is it that's had massive protests lately, and there was like a government crackdown where a lot of folks were killed, and so we walked onto Main Street with this big rowdy mob banging drums and like fireworks and everything's going, chants and megaphones, and we round the street, and immediately we can see the candles kind of like 2 blocks down where the actual city hall is, and the whole march just immediately knew, okay, we can't go to City Hall. We're obviously going back to where we started. And everyone was just silent. Like the rowdiness, just like it had been going on for like almost a half an hour at that point. And we were turning on to the last stretch, and we just like the whole thing went totally quiet. And we walked by silently. And you know, the folks in front of City Hall with the candles give us big fists up, and we were all like, honestly, I was like, I almost cried. It was like one of the most beautiful things I ever saw. And then as soon as we like, everyone had rounded the next corner, and it's like a couple hundred people, you know, we round the next corner, and then the noise starts back up. It was really awesome.
Prison, you got the grade 6 diction dictating your vision of the world and of the earth and of the self. In effect, tell you what depths you may delve. Now, well over the ice, pray tell. Hell yes, the shit's so matted with crap from the beast's ass. Now class clash and misdistribution of wealth. They quell a revolution with TVs and couches, no doubt. They fucked our air, land, and water. Need a ecological magna carta. If not for us, well then for our sons and our daughters. Cause it ain't the winter, but it sure is hell the autumn. You better look to the skies, cause that shit's a doomsday device. bombs drop upon my metropolitan. Politicians talk, but nobody seems to be stopping it. We had it, but then we lost it. Oh shit, now stocks affect oxygen centers in our tropics. We bear the crosses of abuses of our fossil fuels, clear misuse of our Mother Earth's juices and commodities and stock trade oddities is just evil like the almighty dollar bin. Cash yen, denari Ben Franklin, you got them IMF blankets with shackles for anklets. Cash are happy bastards, they leave in slashes and they leave in gashes like NAFTA's labor camps. And we got brand label stamps, we got third world girls with ham cramps. Shit, it's the last days. The forces wait in the bays of Kuwait with ancient hate in the states and the grudges, the Judaists and the Muslims, scuds and floods and the earth's crumbling. Millions die in hunger, food we distribute so improperly, whilst monopolies keep raping all of the foreign property. My skies, 'cause that shit said Doomsday Device. Yeah, you better run for your life, run for your life, run through.
You're listening to From Embers on CFRC 101.9 FM in Kingston, Ontario, broadcasting from the basement of Carruthers Hall. From Embers is a weekly radio show and podcast about anarchist and anti-authoritarian ideas and practice on the territory occupied by the Canadian state. If you're in the Kingston area, you can find us on the air every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. And no matter where you are, you can subscribe to From Embers wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love to hear from you. Send us an email at fromembers@riseup.net with feedback, questions, or just to say hi. We're also a member of the Channel Zero Anarchist Podcast Network. If you like what you hear, you can find more at channelzeronetwork.com. In just a few moments, we'll get back to my conversation with Lee Reed, an anarchist organizer and independent rapper who's been making really great, politically engaged hip-hop in and around Hamilton for a really long time. But first, here's a message from one of the newest shows on the Channel Zero Network.
What's up, y'all? This is Mitch from the Red Strings and Maroons podcast. Each episode, we dig into the little-known histories of armed revolt and community defense against oppression in the so-called United States. We focus on helping curate an ongoing discussion surrounding firearms and the skills needed for defense from an anti-fascist and anti-authoritarian perspective. To listen to each episode, check us out on redstringsandmaroons.com, subscribe on iTunes, or check us out on the Channel Zero Network.
What kind of projects are you putting energy into these days? Whether that's music or organizing or other stuff.
Yeah, it's actually a really busy organizing time for me right now. So after the rent strike concluded, we'd lost our principal demand about dropping the above guideline increase. So there was two demands: drop the above guideline increase and make repairs to the units. And for 7 months, the tenants that were involved stayed on rent strike. And it's like a tactic to try and get people to the table before the AGI is pushed through at the landlord-tenant board. And basically the landlord, in this case, would never come to the negotiating table. So it's a tactic that, you have to be able to hit them well enough in the pocketbook with enough tenants involved and sustain it long enough. I think what we're up against, though, is that CLV was moving into Hamilton. They were buying up a number of properties, and this is the first sort of experience like this that they'd had. And I think they realized that if they gave in, that their strategy could be lost at all the buildings they just purchased. So they were pretty dug in. But what came out of it, basically, from organizing the rent strike is the tenants really, they didn't look at it as a failure. A lot of them got repairs done. And I think the thing that really affects them the most is they have respect now. They know how to stand down their landlord, basically. You know, they're not scared of them, and they've been meeting regularly. They have tenant committee meetings. But in addition to that, there was sort of a core of people that were doing a lot of the organizing in the buildings. And that group and a couple of us have started an organization called Eastgate Neighborhood Defense. And what that is basically is from the 4 towers and the organizers out of there, and a couple of folks from HTSN. It's an organization for the neighborhood. And so step one is they want to help get tenant associations and the other high rises in that neighborhood. So it's like Riverdale East, it's called, but they don't really, that's like a name that the city gave it. The folks out there don't consider it Riverdale. They consider it like Eastgate area. So they called it the Eastgate Neighborhood Defense End. And that got kicked off just a few months ago. And it's not a big group, but it's the sort of more determined core organizers of the rent strike, with 3 of us from HTSN. And it's just sort of getting going, but it's really exciting. Want to see these folks who became organizers through the rent strike are kind of going to help tenants in the neighborhood step up. It's a community of immigrants. It's like over 50% are recent immigrants of the units in the area, and really high concentration of seniors and folks on OW and ODSP. So to see them realize like how much they have in common and how much stronger they are when they're working together is pretty beauty. You know, it's really great. Like the period of time with the rent strike and HTSN working with the towers out there was like kind of life changing for me. And so this is a great extension of that. It's like the folks that were really committed to the organizing aspect of the rent strike have kind of moved on to this group, and they want to help the rest of the neighborhood step up, you know, and it's great. So I'm working on that a lot. I've been working with a couple of different groups of concerned artists. Artists are a kind of hard group to organize with, to be honest, but there's a lot of energy around it right now, and there's a lot of people that are really smart and gifted and creative that are into sort of doing some organizing, doing some like pushback basically against the art gentrification relationship in Hamilton. So I'm not even sure what that looks like yet, but it's an interesting development, and I've been meeting with some great folks around that. I've also been working with a group of folks that have been helping me with my political development over the last couple of years, doing some reading and theorizing around organizing in an effort to sort of, I don't know how to word it, but a group of folks that are into the sort of organizing that HTSN did or that N's doing, that are, kind of trying to envision a new version of working class politics in Hamilton. It's been really busy for me. To be honest, in the last short while, I haven't done a whole lot musically. I went to Europe in June, but been a big focus on organizing this summer and setting ourselves up for some good work in the fall and winter.
I also heard that the Steel City EP has just been nominated for the Polaris long list.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you for that record in particular to be nominated?
Oh man. Well, yeah, first it's like, it's one of the few like real things you can get in Canadian music, you know, that mean anything. Like, so I was super honored, first of all. Like I was just like, I honestly, I couldn't believe it. Like just knowing the process and how it works, and how basically every record that I put out for the last 3 or 4, I've gotten the message from Polaris that's like, do we have your permission to upload your record? For somebody on our jury recommended you, and so now you're up for review, and so your album gets like uploaded to this place, right? And so the first couple times that happened to me, I'm like, oh wow, I might get a Polaris or whatever. But then you look into it and it's like, okay, well, they upload like 250 to 300 of them, and then 200 folks listen to it and rate their top 6 or whatever. Like I was just like, okay. So whenever I got that notice, I was like, and the same thing, Steel City EP. They're like, can we upload the Steel City EP? I'm like, sure, knock yourself out, And I had lost all the kind of there was no part of me that was like, I might get a Polaris, So the morning that it happened, I wasn't even fully paying attention, and yeah, I couldn't believe it. Honestly, I couldn't believe it. And what does it mean to me? Yeah, it's kind of a big deal, It's a pretty important achievement. It can affect some things materially, like applications for grants or like festivals and things like that. Certainly makes the resume like way better, and for it to be that record, yeah, it was really special, because I think that, two great things about it. One, that it made me realize how important it is to be inspired in my writing and to not force writing. Like most of that EP happened so quick, and because the writing was inspired, and it was like a mood and a feeling that carried through the entire thing. Not even a theme, just like the mood itself too was like all the writing occurred really quick and inspired. And so part of my job going forward is to be that inspired when I sit down to write, that's what I learned from it. But yeah, like this, for it to happen with this EP was a big deal for that reason. But then it was also a big deal because, it, getting back to burning bridges, it sort of burned bridges for me. Like it was a hyper criticism of all that's cool in the downtown of Hamilton now, right? And so it was kind of like, it did really great on campus radio. It was the #1 album of the year on CFMU. Actually, it beat the Arkells and whoever else locally, and became the album of the year. But outside of that, there wasn't like a lot of talk of it, or there wasn't a lot of like critical engagement with it, or talk about it. And really it was because it was uncomfortable, it made fun of a lot of the stuff that people were making their cash off of right now in music, and a lot of the apparatus of art and culture in the city. So for it to be recognized by this giant outside Canada-wide force as like, oh, this is one of the best records, it was just so great to know that all those people that wouldn't engage with it or digest it had to like read that in the news and be like, oh, right. I don't mean to sound like a petty person, but that made me feel really good just to know, like, some of the forces I'm up against are massive and have a lot of money and throw a lot of money at their artists and throw a lot of money at things that I don't have, and they didn't get one. So, you know what I mean? It just like, it feels good. That part of it felt really good. And I don't mean to sound petty, but it really did.
What do you think that anarchists in Hamilton, or maybe in general, could learn from artists, or what things do you feel that you've learned from being a musician or in community with other artists over the years that you think would be good to pay attention to?
To be honest, I wish that artists were learning more from activists, but I think that what anarchists could learn from artists, that's a really good question, I think artists have this amazing capacity to find, I don't know how to word this correctly, but real artists, like artists that have worked a long time and have put in time, they are kind of resilient, because there's really no money or fame or great things that comes from doing real good independent music. All you really get from it is the human connection from doing shows, say, and the satisfaction of putting out something that people really like. But it takes a lot of money and it takes a lot of work, and it can be very defeating. And I think that artists are very resilient, and they're very good at pushing ahead and working through pain and kind of depression or problems or trauma or whatever it is. They somehow are able to use the art to not necessarily heal that, but certainly to harness the art to work through it, And I think that, I don't know if, organizing or politics can do the same thing. But if anarchists could learn anything from artists, it, I think, would be, that resilience and that commitment and kind of dedication to a long-term goal that music requires. There's no immediate gratification with music. You've got to start writing, and then you demo, and then you record, and then you mix, and then you master, and then you promote, and then you tour, and then it's like this one thing that you want to do is actually like 200 steps. And artists are, for the most part, ones that are serious about it, are pretty good at looking at that and mapping it out and getting it done,
Are there any other artists from Hamilton that you want to shout out or recommend?
For sure, yeah. There's some great stuff in Hamilton right now. So my homie Mother Tarika has been consistently putting out great stuff. There's an MC from here in Hamilton that's moved to Edmonton recently, but until recently was a Hamilton cat by the name of M.A., spelled E-M-A-Y. Some of the most interesting hip-hop in Canada in the last while, honestly. Makes his own beats and rhymes, and has a very very unique style. Like if you've heard him a few times, like you'd immediately recognize him hearing him. There's an artist from here in town named Shanika Maria that's started just maybe a few years back, doing more shows, and really, really talented young woman. She's part of there's a small sort of community of folks in the city doing like soul music and Afro soul music, mainly led by a dude named Kojo Easy Dante, who's also an awesome community organizer and activist. Started a group called Cobra, the Coalition of Black and Racialized Artists in Hamilton. And so I would say Shanika Maria is like one of the best developments out of that sound locally. She's amazing. She played the Pride Defenders show that we did. You should look her up. Shanika Maria. I'm trying to think. There's as always, there's fantastic like punk and hard music coming out of Hamilton. There's some of the newer sounds of that. Like my homies put out Glassed, a punk band from Hamilton, the last couple of years that I really liked. But on a wider citywide thing, I'm not sure. I might have to send you some more recommendations.
Thanks so much for talking to me.
Not at all. That was fantastic. Thanks a lot.
Try to build their lives in this pile of shit. Heat worthless, greed, eat the first. Heard that
thoroughbreds and circus. Force fed lodges to drop the purchase. Life don't serve a goddamn purpose. Birth school work kid that your curtains in. Plus the world is burning. The folks on